Hello folks, just thought I'd make a very quick video just to describe some of the software that I mentioned in the meeting that we had. These are basically free packages that will allow you to do much of the stuff that things like the Adobe Suite will allow you to do, but these are free packages that you can actually go get yourselves. Be careful where you download anything from. Obviously there are kind of security issues and all that kind of stuff when you go and get free software from any place. Most of these packages, in fact all of these packages that I am suggesting, if you go to the manufacturer's site, are, as far as I am aware, completely safe. I've been using them for years, I've never had any problems. That said, we're going to go through a few of the things. The packages that I'm going to be showing you very briefly are GIMP, Darktable, OpenOffice, OBS, VLC, DaVinci Resolve. These packages will cover an awful lot of stuff to allow you to make a piece of edited work. So I'm going to go through a few of the packages, just very briefly give you a very rough idea of what it is that we're actually kind of looking at with these packages. First up is going to be GIMP, which is a free version, if you like, of something like Photoshop. It does many of the same kind of things. People will, either love Photoshop more or less than this. I am in the camp of GIMP. Not only is it free, it's very powerful, it does a lot of stuff. It's not always the most intuitive thing, but once you've found your way around it, it actually turns out to be a very good piece of software. And can't argue at the price. So what we're going to do is just drop that photo that you saw in the previous one of my motorbike. And there it is. Beautiful. So the various things that you can do with this, you have to understand one thing primarily about stuff like Photoshop and GIMP. They are not art packages. That is not what they are. They're not designed to do drawings with. These are to manipulate already existing images, generally speaking. So with that in mind, you should be able to see up here is a section that has all the tools and stuff in it. Now you have things like select, and this is a rectangular select, and you can choose a section of the photo, and you can cut it out and you can put it back in, and you can move it around if you're in the right mode. You'll see the cursor has a little four-way arrow on it. That is the movement option with that particular tool. So we'll put that back. There's also an oval select, so you can select that kind of shape. There's a lasso select as well, which is a little bit different. I don't particularly use that. What I usually use is something like the scissors. These things are things you want to play with and decide what it is you like and what works best for you. As you can see with the scissors, it tends to try to find lines. It's not perfect, but that's kind of how it works. So you can actually select sections like this, and you can alter them by grabbing the line and kind of moving things around a little bit. Then once you've made your full circuit, click that, and you'll be able to take those out, put them back in, move them around, just like any other select. Other tools that are in this also include things like rotate, flip, scaling. You can shear. You can take this section, for instance, that's here. Let's just move that back to the right mode. So you can take this selection that's here, and you can shift it, and you can scale it, and you can scale it in different directions as well. If you do the usual break the link, you can make it do that kind of stuff. In other options, there's also stuff like color selects, paint brushes, that kind of thing. Like I say, remember this is not an art package, but you can do simple things like not only freehand draw a line in, You can change the opacity of it and all that kind of stuff, which will make it a little bit more transparent. And if I take that right down, you'll be able to see that a little bit clearer. You can do all that kind of stuff. You can size, the aspect ratio, the angle of the brush, all that kind of stuff. There are a selection of brushes in there as well, which you can play around with. Basically, it gives you a lot of options. You can even, if you're particularly wanting a straight line, just do a click on the line. I'm going to make that full opacity. There we go. So you click on that, press shift, and you'll get a line, and you can actually do straight lines, that kind of stuff. So most of the functions that you'll find in something like an art package are kind of there, but it's not the primary purpose of this, and it's a little bit tricky to use as an art package. If you want an art package, find an art package. This is image manipulation. Next up we have Darktable. Now Darktable is kind of an extension, it can be used as an extension to GIMP, it can be used on its own as well, but basically this is a way of manipulating photographs that you've taken, if you are taking photographs. This will allow you to kind of alter very detailed aspects of the picture in the contrast, the colour, all those kind of things. Darktable is particularly useful if you're using a DSLR type camera. It allows you to manipulate so much more when you're using what's called RAW files, or your camera's equivalent lowest level uncompressed photos. So essentially what we got here is Darktable, and we can see this. This is where you drop your photos into this section here, and then you can just double click on the photo that you want to have a look at. This is a photo I took in a park just local to me. So I'm kind of looking at that. I'm going, yeah, it's a little, there's a few things I want to try and change with this. And believe me, this is not me telling you how to do your photos or anything like those. I'm just going to do some very, shall we say, extreme stuff with what's in this photo. So you've got all these options up here. There's different types of modules, basic groups, tone groups, color groups, correction groups, and effects groups. We're going to start with the correction groups. And I go, yeah, that's not quite, it's not quite sharp enough for me, whatever. So I can go into sharpen and I can kind of, let's jack everything up. See how many stars we can actually make appear. Because you can see there's a few stars there. And the more I sharpen it, the more appear. Yeah? And we can just denoise that ever so slightly just to get rid of that pixelization. And then we can go to things like local contrasts, and we can add even more. As you can see, there's a lot of distortion which is being created by doing this process, but you wouldn't normally be doing this at quite the extremity that I'm doing this at the moment. I can add in a little bit of extra noise correction, and then we can come out and you can see how much more bright and sharp the stars are at the cost of other things. This package is very, very good for dealing with any images that you have that need a little bit of correction. You can do stuff like basic adjustments, so you can change the contrast. So again, that's clearly too bright there. I want it a little bit darker. And shift the range of light to dark, all that kind of stuff. And I can add in some extra saturation, a bit more vibrance, just to make it look a little bit more colourful, where I've overcompensated in the contrast and things like that. And you can, if you want to, do stuff like black correction and things like that. You can see distortion sort of coming in, but I'm pushing everything in this software really to the mad limits. But that gives you opportunities to change things on stills. This is Apache OpenOffice. This is a free suite of different applications that you can download. I believe there is a Mac version as well as a PC version, as I think there are for most of these. Now, as you can see, it's just regular applications. There's a word processor, there's a spreadsheet, there's presentation, there's a little drawing program in there as well, database, all that kind of stuff. There's not really much to say about it. It is what it is. It does exactly what it says on the tin, and it does it pretty well. There's plenty of options in there. You can export to Microsoft formats, older ones at the very least. And I've always found this to be an incredibly agreeable package. It ain't as pretty as Word, but it does most of the same stuff. Now we'll move on to OBS, Open Broadcast software. Now this piece of software is a streaming management system. It allows you to build a program of screens that you can actually use throughout your live stream predominantly, though you can, like I am at the moment, record straight to your hard drive without actually going live. In that respect, even just that is actually a very useful thing. There are several functions that this actually allows you to do. It's very, very useful stuff. When you look down here, for instance, in this area down here, you'll have your scenes. So, for instance, I have an opening card for my live streams, so that would be that. I built that in my editing software, and then I just play it as a piece of media. Then there's the live screen. Now, the live screen is usually your camera. In this area here, I do have I have my chat box, which would be populated by the people who are watching the video, so they can talk to me during the stream. You can have cards. You can even have combinations of various things going on. So this is usually my second screen, and this will be my first screen. So if I got a guest on the show, they would go up at the top, and I would be down the bottom, and the chat would be over in this area over here. So, assuming you can see that, I'll try and highlight that in the edit after. And you get offline cards, different functions. If I'm streaming a game, for instance, I would use this screen. So if I'm streaming my console, that's where it would appear. Then I'd have the chat up in the top corner on the right, me down below, and everybody can see what's going on. I have a rather unusual setup in terms of my computer and stuff. It is a little bit OP compared to many people's, but it's not out of the bounds of reason, and a lot of this stuff you can actually still do, even with a fairly basic setup. And PC games, and then back to screen 2. So, you've got all these scenes down here. Those things will help you out. You can actually build all those various things. How do you do that though? How do I actually kind of add things into these screens? Well, you have the sources, and then all you have to do, pick your source. So if it's an image, browse the source. Browse the source will kind of like grab screens from things like Google, that kind of stuff. So we'll add that in. Let's have a look at that. So right, okay, we're going to call it browse the source. We'll add the source. And URL, well, we'll take that out, and what we'll do is I will put in a Google search that I've just done. There we go. Now with that, I can sort of move that around in the screen. I can have it down in the bottom corner if I want, or I can kind of make it bigger. You can see how these things sort of work. You can arrange them and make them bigger and better as you go. Doesn't always work perfectly. As you can see here, there's a transparency for some reason. That's kind of cool, actually. But there you go. That's kind of the various things that you can do. Like I say, you've got all sorts of other stuff. You can add in extra scenes and stuff in there and do what you want with them. It's very, very useful. You can actually build a show of kinds on this. One thing that you could do, for instance, is basically put in this your Skype feed, and then you can kind of arrange them on the screen and actually kind of manipulate your images and video, sound, all that kind of stuff through these kind of options. Now, Streamlabs OBS is the basic version. It's a little bit simplistic. It has a few limitations. One limitation that it seems to have is, like, if you select an image in one scene, it will be selecting that image in the other scene if you put a source into that one. Doesn't seem to be much of a possibility to kind of put multiple images and stuff like that in. So it's limited in that kind of way. Same with media source and all that kind of stuff. There is a different version of OBS, which is OBS Studio, and OBS Studio is more complicated. It's ostensibly the same thing, but it's kind of repackaged in a different way. There are things that it can do better, there are things that it makes a lot harder to do. So I would suggest very strongly that you start with Streamlabs OBS, get used to the kind of idea of how it works, all that kind of stuff, and then perhaps look to move into to OBS Studio at a point that you're a bit more confident and competent with the software. Next up, VLC Player. Now, what is VLC Player? Some of you may actually be familiar with what VLC Player is, but for those who aren't, it's essentially just a media player. I say just a media player, that's actually really quite inaccurate. That is just one of the things that this piece of software does. This piece of software is incredibly powerful as media players go. Not only does it play back a multitude of different types of files, be it audio or video, it also allows you to kind of manipulate inputs and outputs into your system, all kinds of things. It's a very, very useful piece of software that I won't go into too far at this point because a lot of it will be somewhat esoteric. The chances are, though, if you're trying to capture a piece of video or you're trying to work with video formats that are not playing in other formats, all those kind of things, or anything which is a little bit technical, there's a good chance that VLC Player will be able to deal with a lot of that stuff. And finally, we're going to have a bit of a look at DaVinci Resolve. Now, this is a free editing software package that comes from the people that make some of the hardware that we use in the university itself. It comes as part of the package, some of which has to be registered along with the machinery that you buy. However, Resolve seems to be a free editing software package that comes as part of that you can just use. It's really quite decent. It's not my favourite. It's a little bit it operates in a different way to how I'm entirely used to using editing software, but it's not a billion miles off. It is close enough for rock and roll, as they say. So we'll have a quick look around it just to give you a good idea of what's going on. You've got a media bin down here, you've got a preview screen up here. All this is just kind of like for manipulating individual pieces of media. And then you go into the cut, which is basically like a rough cut page. It allows you to examine your timeline in a pretty rough fashion. It's reasonably useful. You have this option of being in here with stills and stuff. You can add fades and crossfades, that kind of stuff, which is very useful. So if we go there, and we'll go here, and then we'll go there. One of the things I found a little bit clunky is the fact that you have to, it's all related to this a little bit too much for my liking. However, that's not a big problem, and like I say, it's free. It will get you out of some very serious holes along the way. So you can just drag and drop stuff as you go along. Now, one of the things I can't do is put a crossfade apparently from still media to moving media. So what you have to do is you go into the edit mode, which is a bit more familiar. You'll see the timeline has an audio section now, because that's what that video is. So if we go to there, and I can zoom in a bit, you'll see that I can actually put a little bit of a fade. I can grab that little nubbin and drag in a crossfade, and I can do the same with the audio. Not doing the same, something like that. So looking out, let's go out, zoom out a bit, and then we can go back a bit. I do apologise for the slightly fudgy way that I do this stuff, but it's a new piece of software for me. I'm not 100% on using it quite as confidently as I have done with other stuff. You can see that fade come in there. Yeah. So it does all that kind of stuff. There's plenty that it will do. It does colour grading and all that kind of stuff as well. Like I say, I won't go into it too far. Maybe that is something I will look at if you need me to do a tutorial video on DaVinci Resolve. My main thing is, say, have a play with it, and if you've got any questions, I will try to answer them as best I can. Same with any of the pieces of software that you find in this video. It's all a case of getting to know it. I know most of that stuff reasonably well, and what I don't know, I'm sure I can find out. But feel free to have a look at that stuff and explore it, have a play with it. If it's something that you don't know how to do, try Googling it first is a good idea. There's loads and loads of tutorials. There's tutorials for GIMP, there are tutorials for OBS, there's tutorials for all of that stuff that are already out there. However, I am more than willing to sit down and figure this stuff out with you via video call or something like that, and we can make this kind of stuff work. The possibilities of what you can do with some of this stuff are pretty wide. There's a lot of avenues for exploration. For instance, you can see Minecraft in this video. You can literally build a set in Minecraft and then have your players act within it if you know how to kind of connect all the various bits and pieces of software to make these things kind of happen. So you could literally make a Minecraft drama. It's just, the possibilities are endless. You've just got to have the imagination to do it. Whatever your circumstances, whatever equipment you happen to have available, there are always options, and this is the key to helping you get through all of this stuff with minimal resources. I'm kind of blessed with some very good systems, but I do appreciate that some people only have phones. But there are many, many ways that you can utilise those various things alongside the university's equipment and make some theatre that is different and forward-looking. And yeah, like I say, your imagination is the limit on a lot of this stuff. So let's see what you can do, and I am around if you need to talk to me. So feel free to do that. I will reiterate at this point that obviously be careful when you're downloading a whole bunch of stuff. Make sure that you go to the reputable sources, and make sure your firewalls and all that kind of stuff are in place. Just be careful. Be as careful as you would under normal circumstances. None of this stuff is IT approved, at least IT department approved, I should say. So yeah, it's kind of at your own risk to an extent, but you're big boys and girls. I've been using this stuff for years, and from the links that I've provided, I've never had any problems with any of these things. Other things you might want to consider getting are media conversion software of some kind. I would highly suggest you go for a reputable paid one if you can, as a lot of the free ones are, to say the least, a little bit dodgy in terms of how they function. They can be a bit malware-ish, but a good media converter is worth every penny, and it will make your life a lot easier. But that's it for now, folks. Any questions, you know where I am. Come get in contact. I will be starting to make some tutorial videos on a couple of these bits and pieces. Probably GIMP, maybe DaVinci Resolve, certainly OBS. I'll probably be starting with OBS as a tutorial series of videos, just to give you some ideas of what can actually happen with this with this piece of software. And that might naturally kind of bleed over into the other pieces in terms of integrating one with the other and all that kind of stuff. But I shall bore you no longer. I hope that helped you, and yes, take care and hear from you soon.